Somebody told me he.
I've got 9 o'clock. We'll call the Lewis County Board of Commissioners June 25th meeting to order. Please join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, begin with agenda review.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay.
I guess you don't
You didn't have no
have did you?
I had nothing to add.
There we go.
Yeah, we really pushed that through, didn't we?
Push that through.
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Our agenda is approved.
Sorry, Bob.
It's all right.
Joint Economic Development Services Agreement. John, come on up.
Morning, John.
Morning, John.
Morning, John.
Here, John. John, you can join us right up here.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. There's
I'm just
not.
gonna keep my head on a swivel here.
Love to see your smiling face. Come on up.
Well, thank you very much for having me this morning, and thank you for your consideration of the Joint Services Agreement under the Regional Economic Development Alliance. I'm here today to present some of the highlights of the update of the document. As you're aware, this is a 3-year agreement, as was presented in previous years. Really, the update to the agreement, there was minor tweaks in language. A couple of the highlights of what was incorporated into this new document was some clarification on Greater Mankato Growth's role in working with both existing businesses and new businesses. We worked with a subcommittee of partners that included Mayor Mark Dean from North Mankato, City Manager Patrick Henges, as well as City Administrator Taylor Gronow from Lake Crystal, and finally Council Member Kwame from St. Peter. And so we worked together in reviewing the existing document and took a look at some of the items under that that wanted to have some language adjustments. Really, it's just more reflective of how we have been operating. And so we wanted to provide some clarification on how we're going to be collaborating together in the future. As has been the practice in the past, Greater Mankato Growth will serve as the primary point of contact for new businesses entering the marketplace. And we will also play a primary role with existing businesses if we're contacted directly. If there is an existing business that directly communicates with any local jurisdiction, Greater Mankato Growth is available as a resource, but it's not required. So all cities can manage their industrial parks without any interference from this agreement, which was something that has been brought up in the past. So we added some additional language to let all elected officials understand that we're not trying to supersede any local jurisdictions' activities in economic development. The Alliance is really focused on celebrating our collective strengths so that we are on the menu for some larger projects that have been coming through the pipeline in a variety of different channels. Additionally, we're available to help out existing businesses, and I can give you a great example. So there was a firm that already had a presence within the city of North Mankato, and they were looking to do an expansion. And so with that contact, Greater Mankato Growth was the primary initially, and then we worked with the city of North Mankato and brought them in for those conversations. And we outlined that, you're in North Mankato. That's why we have North Mankato here in the room with you, and shared that if you wanted to look at locations outside of North Mankato, you're certainly free to do so, but we have North Mankato here first. And Administrator Herenstein was one that was actually very transparent about that, outlining that there are other opportunities, that he could not speak to them, but you could be put in contact with those other jurisdictions. In the end, that firm is still in the development process right now, but they're focused on North Mankato. So that's a great example of how we have transparency within this agreement, and that we work to make sure that we, above all else, support the existing businesses here and make sure they connect to the resources they need so that there isn't a need for them to relocate from outside of the metropolitan statistical area. So we're all on the same team under this agreement, and there's great collaboration that happens every month when we meet at either one of our partner locations. One item that I'll call your attention to as an addition to the document would fall underneath the, let me see here, going back to the earlier part of the document, objective and strategic areas. So we added number 4, marketplace enhancements. I'd outline that this is kind of a new area of work that we're giving more of a name to right now. We have worked, I'd frame it as special projects, but most likely, where we're going to be working with the advisory committee to develop a list of special projects that have economic development impact. You can see that we have examples within the document outlining items such as housing, transportation, childcare, strategic use of vacant buildings, and Main Street work. And so we want to have this a part of the agreement with the idea that it can be both focused on an individual jurisdiction or it could be regional in nature. Currently, Greater Mankato Growth is working with the City of Lake Crystal on their economic development planning efforts that is being led by Region 9 Development Commission, who is also a member of RETA. We've gotten some inquiries from Eagle Lake to do a similar exercise to help them figure out what are some key areas of focus. Basically, we've been hearing from several EDAs within the county that they're trying to figure out where they can make the biggest difference in economic development. And so we're having those conversations with multiple jurisdictions. City of Mapleton has expressed interest, as well as working with the City of Amboy on a specific project. So we're actively engaging throughout the county in economic development, depending on what those local jurisdictions need. With the county's participation under the Joint Services Agreement, that's what opens up all the local jurisdictions to be engaged within this alliance. So Greater Mankato Growth has been attending the mayors and clerks meeting of Blue Earth County, having some conversations with those folks to see if there's anything that we can be of assistance on. And that's kind of the proactive effort that we want to continue to push forward so that the local jurisdictions are aware that they can access Greater Mankato Growth resources under this alliance. So that's the quick snapshot, and if there's any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Okay, any questions for John?
You know, I've been asked the question by other commissioners across the state. Says, well, what does your chamber do? I said, well, we really don't have a chamber in the city of Mankato. We have Greater Mankato Growth. Says, well, what do they cover the county? I says, yes.
Mm-hmm.
He says, you mean your chamber covers the whole county of Blue Earth? I says, it does. So, but what other, I mean, does it cover all of Nicollet County? Does it cover LeSueur County? What does GMG cover when you're thinking chamber type activities?
Sure. So I think you answered the question correctly. Greater Mankato Growth serves as a chamber of commerce for the immediate urban core of the metropolitan area. We recognize that there are other chambers within Blue Earth County and Nicollet County, and so we collaborate with them when we're called upon. In terms of economic development, that's where we play a much more active role across both Blue Earth County and Nicollet County. So if you think about typical chamber activities, you have the business after hours, you have the golf outings, you have a variety of different events tied to business resources. Anyone from the Greater Mankato area, the immediate area, would be welcome to engage in that under a membership. In terms of economic development, kind of the other leg of Greater Mankato Growth, that's where we're much more proactive in working with the jurisdictions across Blue Earth County and Nicollet County. So we don't want to step
So
on
it really is the economic development
Right.
portion that covers the counties.
Correct.
Whereas the chamber activity covers the local metro area.
Correct.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions for John?
No, I just think it makes a lot of sense to collaborate regionally. And,
Absolutely.
That's what this is all about.
Absolutely.
It's a good model.
It is.
Good. Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? There's no more discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
John,
Thank John.
so I hear August, they're gonna maybe have a new ED?
For Greater Mankato Growth,
Yeah.
I would put the money on October.
Okay.
Somebody in place.
I got bad information.
Yeah.
I thought that was really.
That's just maybe old
Well,
information.
it's ever evolving. So right now, we're hopeful that we can make an offer in early September and have them in place by October.
Wow,
So we're moving through the process.
even that's quick.
Yeah, it's a thorough process.
Well, the thing is you want to get the right person.
Yeah.
And that's very, very important. I appreciate the fact that they're taking their time to make sure they get the right person for the job.
Absolutely. It's a lengthy process, but we need to get it right. Because just through the time of transition, it'll be nice to have the right person in place to carry us on into the future.
Absolutely.
Some tough shoes to fill.
Yeah, but you know what? At that time, sometimes you don't fill the shoes. They have their own shoes that they're going to continue on with.
That's right.
Because, John was amazing. We all know that. But everybody has their positive points.
Right.
And the next person, I'm sure, is going to have he or she will have their positive points to continue on with. So, you can't keep on saying, you got shoes to fill.
Yeah.
They're going to have their own thing. And of course, they have some amazing staff to work with them. And as we all know, the staff is what makes the process happen. So thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Have a good day.
You too.
Okay, we'll move on to the Finance License Center. Lisa?
Morning, Lisa.
Good morning. Morning, Lisa.
The License Center looks nice.
Yes.
It does.
It does.
Thank you. The staff is really enjoying it.
Good.
A little bit easier to get around.
It is. More efficiencies, so it's really nice.
And that's a good
We're
thing.
enjoying it. So I have a couple items today. The first one is we had the audit exit meeting. Everything went well. We just have a couple cleanup items that we need to approve, which we do every year. So if you look at the sheet in your packet.
Yep.
We start with just the operating transfers. Most of these were in the original budget document.
I'll move the following operating transfers through 2018. Is that how you want it done, Lisa? Each one? The first one?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
I could,
I will move the expenditure revenue budgets for 2018.
Second.
second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Is there anything that you need to talk to us about that?
Under the human services, this will come up later, but the budget adjustment reflects the fact that we've moved a collaborative from the human services fund to the agency fund, because now the joint powers agreement gets their own grants. Blue Earth County does not, so that accounts for the big adjustment in human services. And then Public Works is just a timing issue. So those are the larger adjustments there.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
And I'll move the special item budget adjustments.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Again, is there anything you need to discuss?
Here again, that special item has to do with the movement from the human services to the agency. So that was a special item.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried.
The next item is actually good news. We are getting some reimbursement of grant for the MNLARS implementation. They have an updated amount that I need to show you in the grant agreement.
If you just count to me, we'll pass them around, then you don't have to.
Thank you. So it's actually $333 more, which is good news. Every little bit helps. So instead of the original amount of $91,335.73, it's $91,669.43. So the board needs to approve.
So moved.
I'll second it. I'll let Mark.
Okay.
Oh, I kind of,
Moved by Mark, seconded by Vance. Any discussion?
Does that help? How much, does that kind of cover a lot, or does it just cover everything? won't
It
cover
helps,
all
but it's just a one-time amount.
Yeah.
And of course, we've taken more time in doing these transactions.
Okay.
Somebody just asked me this morning, it came from another meeting this morning, is when are we gonna have the new process up, and what's the time frame that the state has in getting, do we have any idea?
They're looking at 18 months for are you talking about the system that's going to replace Minlars? They're looking at 18 months for that. And it looks like, they're getting close to a vendor starting that.
That's an aggressive schedule.
Yes.
I think it's an off-the-shelf model
Yeah.
as opposed to,
Yeah. Instead of inventing it from scratch like
Yeah.
they did before, it's kind of like an out-of-state.
Mhm.
And so then it's just making Minnesota adjustments.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I might just add, within this resolution providing this additional funding, the state made it very clear that they wanted sign off from the
Yeah.
counties or the deputy registrars for any liability for Minlars. So just so you understand that by accepting this money, we're also relieving them of some liability for the Minlars system.
So the question is of course, the $91,669, that probably pays for the problems we had in the past.
no.
Doesn't.
Yeah.
I can't.
Pays for a portion.
Well, I mean, this is a total amount, correct, Bob?
Yeah.
So this is also gonna be paying for the issues we have for the next 18 months until they get something new.
Well, it's an amount that they gave us.
Yeah.
is all I can say.
It's better than nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why, yeah.
And like Bob pointed out, I actually need to sign a liability release, and then this all needs to be submitted by the end of June in order to get this amount.
Well, either you sign it or you don't get the amount.
Correct.
And, I guess,
And they're still not going to be held liable
no.
if you don't take it.
Right. I
That's
understand.
that's kind of what my question was. There is liability out there because this thing is messed up,
Yeah.
and people have gotten overcharged, undercharged, and so what is our risk? Is it worth 91,000? And again, the state might not be liable, but we might not be liable then. But by signing this, now are we saying we're liable, or are we just saying the state's not liable?
I think we're saying that the state is not liable for
So it's not saying
future
we're
claims
liable.
from us. It's hard to know what might come in the future, but it's hard to turn away this kind of money.
They are complicated because it's someone, and I've heard the stories where someone would go in and their fees would be too high, or if they're too low, they probably aren't going to care. But I have heard where people just, had to pay too much, and so I think our risk is small because it's small amounts of money on license and tabs, but there's still a risk. And of course, there has to be a string attached to that money, and that had to be the
Yeah, they're not going to just give it. But I was just kind of wondering if it kind of covered some of our overtime and all that stuff. I mean, if it
Yes,
made
to
a dent
implement,
or, yeah.
to implement it did cover some of the overtime that we incurred to get us up and running.
That's all I knew it would. It's a magic number for them, but I wrote it.
Well, it was a finite number. It was
Right.
$13 million, and they
That's
had to
right.
divide it among 87, or however many.
Yeah.
So this is a
Yeah.
rather large portion of that 13 million.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It
I
really
was
is.
actually happy
That's-
with
that's
what
what
we
I
are
thought.
receiving.
When you think of some of the counties which are much larger than us,
And it wasn't only counties, it's your private deputy
Private
registrars
yeah.
also,
I'm sure that.
and some cities that also are doing it,
Yep.
Office.
so.
Okay.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Lisa.
work on it,
Thanks,
Lisa.
Okay, we'll move on to the landfill construction. Michael,
Woo-hoo.
forward.
Landfill construction.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
Morning, Michael.
Good morning, Mike.
Yes, this morning I get to bring forward our 12th cell construction project since the county took over the operations and ownership of the landfill. And so you'll find that on page 19 of your packet there. We're looking at constructing a new solid waste cell at the landfill, and it's in the area that we refer to as the saddle. So if you look at the map on the second page of my materials, you'll kind of see what we're referring to as you drop down into the customer service, from the customer service area down into the landfill operations open face area. This is actually filling in part of the space from where we had the existing unlined portion of the landfill and the portions that we started doing with our operations that is our line. And so this is a 5.2 area acre that will get some liner on top of it, and then we'll be wrapping it into the existing space. It should hold about 380,000 cubic feet of solid waste area for future garbage disposal. It is a modification from our existing plan, and it's a modification from moving from that cell 12, 13, 14, 15 area, which is in that upper left corner of the graphic there, to actually backfill some of the space just to be a little bit more efficient in our use of it. It's also, without getting too far into the garbage geek speak for you, is it will allow us to change the slope at which we stack the garbage. By filling in this area, it'll give us more airspace down the road because we've set a new base level. So it's just going to be more efficient and a longer term better solution for us, why we switched over to that area. You'll note, if you're familiar with any of our previous projects, that this is about double the size of some of our earlier cell constructions, but it's only giving us about 75% more capacity because of that whole filling in of that saddle area. Just not able to stack it quite as efficiently there, but it'll give us some more potential down the road. The plan for the project is to get construction moving in August so that it can be completed tentatively in late September. And that's all because of a state requirement that we stack 5 feet of fluff garbage on top of that liner before December 31st to make sure that there's no freeze or thaw issues. So
What's fluff?
Fluff is garbage that doesn't get compacted. So we have to leave it so that it has some insulation value to it. Normally we would compact that all the way down as much as we potentially could, but we need to get 5 feet of garbage that's just spread on there so that it protects our liner. Yeah, there's a lot to learn in the garbage world. I'm learning that in the last few months.
You're getting the terminology down really well,
I am
Mike.
learning it, yes, absolutely. So we need to make sure our schedule meets that in our
Look at the file, it says that's all fluff.
Right, that's what we'll be able to say. Mix it in with some fill. So our landfill engineer is saying that that's a schedule that can be met with that August through end of September time frame. Part of the project will require us selecting an engineer who's highly qualified for the project. There's not a lot of folks that do this sort of work, but we do have the luxury of having worked with the same contractor for quite some time. And so we do believe that company is interested in the project. And then, of course, we'll go through our purchasing and our bid review process that we do on all of our landfill operations to make sure that everything is appropriate in that regard. We do work with Foth Engineering, which is our landfill engineer, who will make sure that it's designed appropriately to meet state and federal regulations. They'll also help us with the cost estimates to review all of that, and we'll work through it. So what we're looking for today from the board is approval of the resolution that you'll find on page 21. That will authorize the county administrator and myself as the Property and Environmental Resources Department Director. Had to get that in there just to keep practicing saying it, to execute any of the agreements and any of the documentation required to get the project underway. I should also note, in addition to the actual construction with the liner, we will also take the opportunity to use that contractor who's selected to do some stormwater management infrastructure repairs. They have the right equipment and the expertise, so we might as well take advantage of it while we have them on site. So there'll be a little bit of that rolled into the project as well, as appropriate for the project. So I can answer any questions. Otherwise, as I mentioned, I'll be looking for acceptance or approval of that resolution.
So I move to approve.
No, second.
Okay, any further discussion?
I think it's
Nope.
Okay,
talked about it.
there's no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved.
All right, thank you, folks.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mike.
We'll move on to planning and zoning. George?
Morning, George.
Hi, George.
Morning, George.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
PC 14-19 is a request from Harold Abbas and Angela Abbas. Is a request for review and approval of the preliminary and final plat of the Apple Road subdivision that will result in the creation of 2 lots. The properties involved are zoned agricultural and include a small portion that lies in the Shoreland Overlay District of the Little Cottonwood River. The project area is in the southern half of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 17 Cambria Township and the northern half of the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 20 Cambria Township. Mr. Leary presented the staff report. The applicant was present and had no additional comment. There was no public comment. There was little discussion by the Planning Commission. Following the discussion, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward to the County Board a recommendation of approval based on the findings prepared by staff, and the board action is the resolution.
Okay, very good. At this time, we'll open the public meeting, public comment portion of this meeting, and if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak to PC 14-19, please come forward, state your name and address. Is there anyone that would like to speak to PC 14-19, please come forward. Is there anyone that would like to speak to PC 14-19? If there's no public comment, I'll bring it back to the board for action.
I'll move approval with for the conditional use permit with the findings by staff.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
It says it in the report. It was
Yeah.
non-eventful.
Yeah.
Staff had a good report for us and was very well prepared.
Okay. There's no further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
George.
George.
Thanks, George.
Okay, we'll move on to Human Services. Phil?
Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Phil.
Well, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I have several action items for you today. I do want to make the board aware that I do have one item that I'm walking in as well, a resolution that's brief, and I'll explain that at the end of my action items if I can. In the board packet, you'll see the sections of contracts and agreements that we're bringing forward for this month. The first of those is the Mental Health Center, and the first item there is a follow-up contract from last month. Talked about the 10 different clinics that are receiving just short of $20,000 each, and that the department chose us as the multi-regional project fiscal lead, which we get 3% of that total. So this is the follow-up contract for our piece of that with Qualifax, who is the vendor in this case. And we are going to try to add on that functionality so that we can bring our ability to report electronically from the vendor to the state, which has been very problematic in the last couple of years. So that is the first item. The second item, Minnesota Department of Health, Forensic Services. This is a really shared services agreement with one of our prescribers, Melinda Henderson, and she is a state employee, and for years we have subcontracted with her, which has been very mutually beneficial. The rate of her contract is right around $60 an hour, and there are no changes to that cost on this cycle. The term is the July 1st of 2019 through June 30th of 2021. And I'm sorry, backing up to the previous one, it was a term of April 1st of 2019 through November 30th of 2019. The next two items, Nicollet County Human Services and LeSueur County Human Services, are both psychiatric contracts that we have had with these two counties, our neighbors, and it is really to provide additional psychiatric medication management, diagnostic assessment, urgent care services to really what we refer to as their SMI. So the serious and persistently mentally ill is a defined category in statute, And then there's kind of all the rest. And so we're covering all the rest in this case, just like we do for ourselves. And you'll see the contracts are mirror contracts except for the amounts. Nicollet County, it's population-based, $25,000, and LeSueur County, $20,000. The terms are the same, January 1st of 19 through December 31st of 19.
Can I go back to the first one? So, in other words, we're going to build an electronic health record ourselves because the state obviously isn't working. I just wanted to make sure that I had that right.
Yeah, and Commissioner, Mr. Chair, how I would describe this is the electronic health record is what we purchased for Qualifax. So there's all kinds of electronic health records. The original vision was that all the electronic health records would talk to each other,
Yeah.
and they don't. And that includes the state. And so the interface between all these different systems that Mayo or Mankato Clinic or we might use is not as fluid as we would hope because a bunch of independent contractors designed and developed these records.
Independently.
Then we have the problem with the state, and that's what this is fixing, is there's no interface with the state either. And so what they're asking for is a bunch of data, and even though it's the state and the counties, we don't have any mechanism to send them data. So we're literally like hand recording data, arguing about what this data means. That doesn't compare right to the county over here who does or doesn't have a mental health center. And it's been a real struggle. So this is, and this is kind of how I explained it to Bob, the positive spin on this would be if we could punch through this and if we could design a system that we have an interface that we can take really any electronic health record and prove that there's an easier way to talk to the state, that's the goal. So it's really a carve out of that pie you described specific to DHS, and that's why it's their money. It's extra money they had in community support grant. And so they took it, bundled it, and said, go prove that we can actually do this. And as you all know, we've had lots of examples of things that haven't gone well. So we're hoping between ourselves, our clinics, these 10 clinics, and a private vendor that we can just get some traction and prove that this can happen. So that's the vision.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. I hope we're successful.
I do too.
Yes, it would be nice. Mr. Chair, continuing on, I think I finished the mental health section. Public health, just one item, the TANF, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families Grant. This is one of our larger grants that really covers, you'll see in the paragraph, teen, pregnant, and parenting program, and really WIC clinic activities. So that's why it's a bigger chunk of resource. Our goal is healthy pregnancies, healthy births, parent education. We really measure that by thriving children getting ready to start kindergarten. So it's all that early intervention and trying to make sure that kids are ready to enter school and have some functional ways we can show that they're healthy and thriving. It is a 4-year award totaling $276,000, $76,400, and that's $69,100 annually. That is not a change either to previous funding cycles, the term July 1st of 19 through June 30th of 2023. Then adult mental health and behavioral health. So this is the case management side of what we do at the county, Julie Moniz's area, and the interface here with the initiative, which is a very large piece of what we do in our mission. The grant fund is between ourselves, South Central Community-Based Initiative, which is a joint powers board now, and Blue Earth County. This is for the adults with serious and persistent mental illness that are either uninsured or underinsured. The staffing allocation is the biggest piece of that money, almost $800,000 for case management, community support, therapy, and flex funding that we have available. It also, the entirety of the grant includes clubhouse programming up to $20,000 a year, and then another very sizable piece of uncompensated psychiatric costs for us up to $527,650 a year. You'll see it towards the end of the paragraph, the administrative fees that we collect for our management of these services in Blue Earth County. For the big grant, we receive $126,302 for admin fees. And then there's also the crisis legislative appropriation, which is really the crisis center, so the $600,000 that we get, and that we also get an admin fee for managing that. The contract format is new, kind of itemizing this. I like it because sometimes it is hard to kind of refresh us about where is it going, and we have been cut. Our numbers were higher a few years back, so this is an area that we were cut, and we're hoping that we can prove up our need for these services and stabilize them, but that's yet to be seen as we go forward in mental health. The allocation process and the amount of money in aggregate really hasn't changed from the previous cycle, though. The term, January 1st of 19 through December 31st of 19, so I'll bring this back annually. Disability services, I did group these together, but certainly willing to try to pick them apart if you have any more specific questions. Two major areas, the first one in transportation, and so how we pay for transportation, medical transportation really is different in different areas. I just looked at Commissioner, and I know that we have experienced this both personally and professionally about how all this goes, and then your great commitment to transportation in our area as well, all of you, a big hot topic in our area of the state. These are two vendors, and you'll see that in this area, so each part of DHS defines how we get paid and how we can engage transportation vendors differently. This is still for medical appointments. Waiver transportation, which means medical assistance dollars, is still where we're at, but it's a specific carve out. There's really different kinds of drivers. You'll see a list of individual drivers, special transportation, common carrier, all at market rate. These two providers, Care Transport LLC and WS Transportation, are considered common carrier agencies. So those are the contracts I'm bringing to you today for medical assistance. The needs for transportation are included in the care plans for each person, so they're written in, and that's an important piece. So it's not just something you can just call up and get, but it needs to be part of your plan if you need additional transportation. And obviously the goal is for a person with a disability to gain access to community-based services, resources, and activities. The rates are set by DHS, but I can give you a sense of what those are, which is $11 for a pickup. So when you show up, you get $11 plus $1.30 a mile. So it is, I think it's a decent chunk of change. I think you can see some margin in that as well, which I think is needed. The term of both of these contracts are July 1st, 2019 through December 31st of 2019. I also bundled this one because we have several providers that we depend on for what we call SILS services, semi-independent living services in our county. Smiles, REM, Ali Services, Harry Myring, Prairie Community Services, and Dignity for Life are the vendors in this area. The paragraph following that were purposes to meet service needs of eligible county residents with a disability. The services help consumers remain living in their own homes, so that is the mission of this dollar that we're trying to provide wraparound support so they can stay in their home with assistance with independent living skills. The term of all the agreements are from July 1st of 2019 through June 30th of 2021, which represents a new 2-year contract cycle for SILS, which certainly talked about with County Administrator Meyer about trying to move to 2-year contracts, so we're glad for that. There's some volume with these. The rate of the contracts will increase by 1% in 2019 and then by 2% in 2020. I did just provide a couple of bulleted information pieces here, still contained in the action item, but just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. We do contribute 30% of the overall cost. There is a lot of churn in this area, but you'll see that the overall amount isn't really that much of $154,000 and 24 consumers. So it's not a huge area, but it's an important area for those people and those families, obviously. And then just to highlight the final bullet too, we do always want to make sure we do have a list of providers so consumers have a choice as far as who they work with. So those are the items I have for today.
Do I have a motion to?
I'm sorry, interrupt me and interrupt you.
One more.
Yes, and this one that I walked in, I apologize, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I talked to Bob about this a little bit. The timing, this is our procurement for managed care contracting. And as you know, the entities that carry our what we call prepaid medical assistance plan dollars have to, every 5 years, go through this cycle where really DHS has a direct relationship with them. They engage them in this process where they basically have to bid for a contract. The health plans show their wares and what they have and if they have any unique offerings. They talk about geographically specific issues that, like for our county, what their presence is in our community, how they can support some of our nuance if we have any specified areas. My reason for walking this in today is it often is a little bit of a tough road for us. And the contract is really held between DHS and the health plans. They ask for a whole lot of feedback, and it's a whole lot of work. We get what used to be discs and now are thumb drives with tons of information. We have to review it all and somehow rank all the health plans. And what's happened, and I just need to share this with the board very honestly, is a lot of times we have brought to you our recommendation. Let's say there's 3 plans that have bid for our services, and we'll say, well, we pick these 2. And I don't know, Bob, if you remember, but I don't know that we've ever had what we recommend go through DHS. So it always switches on you, and you feel it's a little, it feels a little disheartening when you put in a lot of effort. And in the end, they have a different kind of set of criteria that they use to pick who gets what. And so we've had all 3 of the ones, and I might, if you're okay with it, Mr. Chair, I'll just read this to you. It's very short, and I know because I walked in, but there's 3 that have bid. We've worked with all 3 of them at different times together. Our recommendation at the end that you'll hear is just that we basically green light all 3. So that would be our recommendation to the board.
3?
All 3, and the 3 are, and I'll just read this if that's okay, Mr. Commissioner. So whereas Minnesota Department of Human Services has published a request for proposals to provide healthcare services to recipients of families and children in Minnesota Care in 80 counties in Minnesota, including Blue Earth, and whereas DHS has requested county evaluations and recommendations regarding the RFP proposals from each representative county, whereas Blue Plus, UCare, and Medica, so Blue Plus, UCare, and Medica submitted proposals to provide managed health care services in Blue Earth County, whereas representatives of Blue Earth County Human Services has reviewed and evaluated the proposals, whereas Blue Plus, UCare, and Medica have submitted the suitable proposals to meet our needs, is our finding. Therefore, let it be resolved that Blue Earth County Board of Commissioners supports the recommendation of Blue Earth County Human Services approving Blue Plus, UCare, Medica as a managed care organizations providing managed health care services in Blue Earth County.
Those Blue Plus, UCare, and Medica.
Correct.
All right.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So we're suggesting they can pick from the 3. They will only pick one, is that correct? Or
No,
could they
and
go
that-
with all 3?
Yeah,
Not pick any of them.
yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Landcamer, it has been all over the map, so sometimes we have said we want more than one, and
Yeah.
we've gotten one.
Okay.
Which, as you might know with some of our colleagues, contiguous colleagues, county-based purchasing
Yeah.
really wants this to be, when they're the county base, that they're it. So that's been kind of a hot topic over the years. It's been every combination thereof. So I wouldn't be surprised that we get all 3, but I wouldn't be surprised if we got 2. I would be surprised if we get only 1.
Okay.
I would say that's what I would expect is at least 2, maybe 3 for choice. They've touted that back and forth. The choice is the goal, and then other times I know Blue Cross somehow fell out of favor, and they were out across almost the whole state, and now they're back in. And so those are the kinds of, I guess, pathways that get established, it seems, as this course takes place. So yeah, hard to say, but I would expect 2, maybe all 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Phil?
I'll move the follow all
Okay, we'll move the action items.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I do have a question on the transportation contracts.
Yes.
What process do we use? I mean, are these the only people that have applied? Because there's many cab services around the city. What process do we use to figure this out?
It's a very fair question. I would say we, just like the SILS contract that you saw, a list of providers, we engage anybody that approaches us. So we usually do not approach. Would we one part of your answer, is we don't go out and seek out a preferred provider, if you will. So these providers, these two transport companies came to us. I will say the filtering that does happen is we do explain our requirements about insurance and coverage and all of that. And some of the smaller vendors, or depending on how they're organized, struggle with that. So as we engage a communication with them, they sometimes say, well, we don't have that much insurance. It would cost us a lot of money to go get that much insurance. So sometimes time takes place, over a process of them sorting out, do they really want to contract with us or not? So that's really the only
So
filtering.
before they can come and work for us, because that's basically what they're doing, is they're working for Blue Earth County.
Right.
They need to have a set amount of insurance for our liabilities to make sure if anything happens during that transport,
Right.
they cover it and we don't have to.
Exactly. And it's a great and actually very sophisticated question, Commissioner, just because it gets very complicated, as I said, when you go through all the different disciplines in DHS, because they all have different rules. Actually, our rules are often the ones that trump, is we want a consistency, through Pat's office, through what Bob recommends for us to be consistent from vendor to vendor. So a lot of times it's our rules that actually trump over some of the rules that the DHS might let us contract directly with someone. But it's so difficult to do that without a physical contract and making you all aware of the fact that we do it in a very systemic and kind of regular way. So we standardize our process.
And I apologize, but I don't know Care Transport. Where are they out of?
They are in town here. I do believe it's a smaller vendor, a startup company. The gentleman that started it, I'm sorry, I do not know his name, but I can certainly get that for you, Commissioner. But I do think he's a startup, and he's very much interested in being in this niche. So
But he's covered the insurance.
Yes, so he's
Wow.
had his act together. Exactly
Wow,
right
that's
is how I describe it. So it was really nice.
Yeah, if
And
you could give more information,
do that.
I'd certainly appreciate that.
For sure.
As we've discussed, the two of us have special needs children, and
Yes.
we do understand that I mean, my son uses WS Transportation, and so this kind of stuff is not only is personal to us, but I like to know what's going on in there. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
If not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners do have an action item, and I will describe myself as kind of flying over our ship world here today for you to give you some sense of what's happening. Bob and I have been talking about work sessions, and this is certainly one if you do have interest, either a few months from now to hear more about SHIP, or if you want to drill in a little deeper than where I go today, we certainly can do that. And part of that is there's a lot of moving parts to SHIP, and so I really would appreciate staff being in the room if we go deeper into the weeds. But I will give you this overview that Kelly and Kristen and others have provided to me. This very first slide, you'll see just kind of the definition of what SHIP is about, and that first kind of part where it says policy, system, and environmental change. Those three types of interventions are what we do in the SHIP mission. Is we look at policy, system, workflows, and also environmental changes. The methods, how we partner, are mini grants, technical assistance, and local facilitation. And there are examples of that. The technical assistance is often trainings, meetings we attend, and webinars. The local facilitation, there's like Mankato Area Care Network, the Food Policy Council, Worksite Wellness Network of agencies that have worked on those things. And so staff will be at those meetings and making sure that we're supporting those in either a technical assistance kind of way or an actual facilitation of any of those meetings that happen. The second slide starts to get into some examples, and obviously it's not all examples, but just the grants in 2018 and 19. And I will say some of these are bigger than others. We had a grant that was a multi-year grant that was with the city of Mankato that was about $48,000. Most of these are maybe 2,000 to 5,000. They're pretty small, kind of helping grants that are pretty targeted. They all get shipped right to MDH. So the primary filter, even though there are many grants that we administer, is MDH has to approve them. And so there's some common criteria that they use first. You'll see the areas in the breakouts of this second slide: the school, Listing, East, Emmanuel, Lutheran, Lake Crystal, Welcome Memorial, Mount Olive, and LSS Meals Program, affecting several areas in the schools. And you'll see that spread about your districts. It was interesting as I kind of look and want to be sensitive to whose district are some of these projects in. Some of you have the meetings in your district, and some of you are very involved in some of these projects in another commissioner's district, so they cross over quite a bit, but you'll recognize obviously those that are within your district and also those that you're directly involved with. The healthcare example here is we used the U of M Family Medicine Residency to help with some food piloting that we did about healthy eating and meal preparation. And that was a good partnership. The community block up in the upper right, you'll see a number of projects that you all have been associated with and involved in. Certainly American Lung Association, we're active in that area ourselves. Bethlehem Community Garden, the community farm. Our work with the city was that bigger project. Heart and Soil Community Garden, and Mapleton Community Garden. And then work sites, Blue Earth County, ourselves, Downtown Hy-Vee, LCWM Secondary, Mankato Clinic, MNRA, Region 9, and then Vine as well. There's also another, so these all received some form of financial support as well through MDH and administrated through our SHIP program. The next slide is ones that may or may not have had any money or a very small amount of money associated with it, but we're still very involved in the policy and the system or the environment piece. So just a listing again of schools, and I won't read them all, but they're all important efforts. The healthcare examples, the community well, and then the work site pieces, all as examples again of active projects that we've been in this past year. It helps to just provide a little picture here of the community garden, City of Mapleton on the next slide, District 5, active transportation, District 4, safe walking school bus. And then one that's near and dear to my heart, because I live with these folks now up in Vine, is just the enhanced fitness as part of Maine Faith in Action. And really that is all of your districts that are involved in that, very well represented. These hydration stations and the bike safety curriculum on the photos on the next slide, something I know a number of us were out at MSU, I don't know if that was a year or more ago, but I think we've just received just really good feedback from biking in our community and these watering stations, which really make a big difference. And for a young person to associate physical activity and drinking of water, which is very important, is something that feels like it's really kind of a stake in the ground that will make a cultural difference in the long haul. So they seem like little things on the face of it, but I do think they really do matter in their infrastructure. As is the next one, you'll see the before and after at MRCI. A couple of our commissions very directly related to this effort. Just about MRCI's mission. And you'll see the mother's room before and after. SHIP is actually able to purchase the furniture and the rug and all of that, paint. And so really improve a space and make it functional for the mission of breastfeeding support. And then finally, an example for MTU on-site energy. District 2, just the tobacco-free gowns policy and cessation support for that mission and their building and employees as well. So that's a very active area regarding clean air and tobacco-free workplaces. So that's the flyover. I'm certainly willing to try to answer any questions. Yes.
Any questions for Phil?
Not really a question. I would love to have a work session on this because I think there's lots going on with it,
Yep.
and I'd like to understand it better.
And it's definitely, and I don't mean to minimize it in any way, but it's very much of a feel-good. I mean, you guys, I think, know the players, know the people personally, and there's this connection when we do have those talks. So we'd be glad to do that. And staff also feel that throughput when they're able to sit with Yolo and tell their stories. So I would welcome that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be good to have that again.
One other question. Does Blue Cross Blue Shield still invest in this? They
do-
used to.
Yeah, and I don't know if they put in infrastructure money, you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know, Commissioner, if they do or don't. I can check.
It's okay. I was just kind of curious, yeah, because they were a
They
big
were a
part of
partner,
starting it,
and
yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
I think that was that foundational kind of support at the structural level, as opposed to, I certainly know that we still partner with them in some of the projects, but
Mm-hmm.
it might have shifted so that now it's more strictly the MDH money that comes
Yeah.
through. But that would be interesting to know, because they might fund that resource upstream. It's very
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, that would, because I
Thanks.
thought that they still play a part.
Yep.
Call though. It's a good question.
Yep, it sure is.
Cool stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
But just one more thing. This shows the cooperation regionally that we have, and I think most people don't realize that.
Right.
So I think it's really important to understand that there is huge cooperation going on regionally, and that we pay in Blue Earth County a big part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay. Take a short break. Okay, we'll move on with our administrative services.
Well, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, first item is county board minutes for June 11th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Next are the bills for the weeks of June 6th and June 13th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I've got like three.
Okay.
And basically, they're just the large ones, and you have a pretty good idea what the answer is before you ask the question. But you got Mathwitz for $829,000, which I'm saying County Road 1,
That is correct.
and then OMG Midwest for $1,169,000.
That is the overlays contract, so, you know, the public works overlays on a number of different roads. So it was a annual contract that we do.
Oh, then I didn't know what the answer to that one was, so that's good. Gustavus Drainage for $255,000, second week.
That is County Ditch 48 improvement. So it's a ditch project.
But it Gustavus Construction, is it?
Gustafson.
Oh, Gustafson, I said.
Did I say
He
Gustavus?
did
you
say
said
Gustavus.
Gustavus, and I
He
thought-
did.
Well,
Don't worry, that's why I asked.
Gustafson. Yes, it is Gustafson. All right, that's all I had.
Okay, any other discussion?
Nope.
If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 9 in your packet is the Human Resources Department agenda. Just to have informational items for the board today. We filled a taxpayer services specialist position in the recording area, as well as a custody officer. And then we did receive a resignation of a human resource specialist, and so that's what we have for the board today. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Nope.
All right, item number 10 in your packet then is a repair report for County Ditch 29. This is a ditch down in Danville Township. Really reporting tile breaking down year after year. The renter and landowner are looking to replace an existing branch through their property. The total amount of this repair is estimated at $16,811.86. So we're recommending approval of this drainage report.
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, then item number 11 in your packet is an operating services agreement for the All Seasons Arena. This is a renewal of the agreement. It is a 3-year renewal. Really, there hasn't been any change in the narrative portion of the agreement. It really is updating of the agreement to have new population estimates, and then there was some small change to the formula, which probably impacted us the most of any of the partners. I will tell you that Eagle Lake has now agreed to be an active partner in the All Seasons Arena. So we had previously been sort of responsible for the financial portion of that community. Madison Lake has not chosen to participate, but we adjusted the formula so any of those cities within District 77 boundaries that were not participating, those costs get allocated across all of the existing partners. The result is a reduction in our contribution to that $40,000 operating subsidy, reducing it from a little over $5,000 to about $2,600, so almost cut in half. But this only kind of addresses the operations of the All Seasons Arena agreement. I know there's discussion in the community about larger need for additional facilities. That's sort of separate from this. And so this is just talking about that operating subsidy and the actual operation of the facility that currently exists.
Yeah, just might add that, yeah, there's certainly going to be changes in the future somewhat with ASA, plus obviously with communities overall, what we end up doing with additional ice rinks or opportunities. So I'll move the item.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Okay. Then motion and second. Is there any further discussion?
Just a question, and I don't know if we know the answer. Has Mankato made their decisions as to where their tax is going to go?
Or the what?
To the projects, to the recreational projects? Have they made a decision? I don't know. They haven't. Thank you, Trey.
Yeah.
I didn't think they had, but I thought maybe I missed it. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is approved. Okay,
Keith's here.
we'll move on to the MICA update. Come on up.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Pull one more chair up.
So how many more days left do you got, Keith?
Pardon me?
How many more days left do you have?
Roughly 30. Not exactly counting.
You're not counting them down that close.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here for the last time as Executive Director of the MICA Association. With me this morning are Steve Novak, Nancy Selesky, and Carly Stark, who are going to follow me on the agenda. I'm going to start off with sort of an overview of what happened during the last session and kind of the outlook for the future. So I believe you all have a document that's also being projected. Good news out of this session is that Blue Earth County is looking at a $354,000 increase in its county program aid, and it will receive probably additional money in 2021 when the full appropriation for county program aid will go from $26 million for 2020 to $30 million for 2021 and subsequent years. Nancy will cover some changes in cost shares, but overall, between some additional cost shares relating to the provisional release of sex offenders offset by reductions in the substance abuse area, we probably came out okay. We're not looking at any substantial new payroll taxes. There was a threat under a bill that was going through the House of a payroll tax that statewide would have been over $830 million. That's gone away. And because the legislature acted to
repeal the sunset of the provider tax while at the same time reducing it slightly. There's no threat of shifts in costs for medical assistance or MinCare to us, which was one of our major concerns. However, you all know that the bad news is that we got no new transportation funding. Steve will cover that more thoroughly. On the positive side of the ledger in that area, we did get $200,000 to continue what hopefully will ultimately be the transition to the state totally taking over wetlands permitting. Right now, as you probably know, you got to pull 2 permits when you're doing a road project or other building projects affecting wetlands. One with the state, one with the federal government administered by the Corps of Engineers. If what we've been working on for now really 5 years goes forward, the 2 permits would be combined into one. Administered by the state through Bowser or DNR. There was some additional financing authority given to the counties levying the local option sales tax, so you can now use the proceeds from that tax to issue revenue bonds rather than GO bonds. And we continue to have some funding for bridge rehabilitation. Now, so in the short term, things look pretty good. But in the long term, I'm sorry to tell you, the state's ill prepared to deal with the possibility of a future recession, the fact that the state's really at full employment. We don't have enough bodies to generate new economic activity, to generate new revenues for the state. That plus the actions of this past legislature has left the state sort of ill-prepared to deal with that possibility. First, the state's revenues, while they're growing, that growth rate's declining. On the page under long-term general fund or GF outlook is reason for concern. You'll see that revenues for the current biennium, the 2021 period are going to grow at 6.2%. Next biennium, that's projected to decline 5%. That's not anticipating any recession, but it is anticipating that the economy is going to slow. Expenditures are going to slow too if they choose not to fund inflation. But they're slowing at a slower rate, from a rate of a 6% growth for the current biennium to 5.7%. And that really leads to the problem. The state is basically using its fund balance, or what's characterized here in the top line as the carryover, or what the state calls its balance forward, to fund a substantial amount of its current expenditures under current projections in the next biennium, the 2022-23 period that would begin on July 1st of 2021 to the tune of over $500 million. Now, I don't want to say that the state hasn't done that in the past. They have, but they've usually done it in poor economic times. Right now, we're in pretty good economic times. In fact, this is probably as good as it's going to get. Yet they're setting themselves up to look for over $500 million to come out of fund balance rather than current revenues. Furthermore, those expenditures reflect the anticipation that a task force is going to say, here's another $100 million of savings in the Health and Human Services area that actually haven't been identified yet. If the future legislature, the 2021 legislature, doesn't enact that, the problem will be $100 million worse. Finally, as you all know, the expenditure side of the ledger doesn't reflect inflation. If inflation was fully captured in the 2022-23 figures, those expenditures would be 2.7 million higher. They simply don't have the resources to do that. Now, they don't have to fund inflation, but generally a legislature does fund a substantial portion of it. In the current biennium that will begin on July 1st, they funded about $820 million of the $1,097 million that they said they do. As I noted, the economy, the forecast does anticipate the economy is going to slow. So the projections capture that. I guess the one final good piece of news I'll leave with you is the state's revenue collections to date have been running substantially ahead of forecast. And that's kind of contrary to the message I'm giving you. But unfortunately, in talking to the staff at the Department of Management and Budget, what they think happened is, one, it's kind of a new normal out there. It used to be the rule would be for individual income taxpayers that you accelerate deductions and you delay income. And one of the primary ways to accelerate those deductions is to prepay all your state income taxes. But because of the substantial increase in the standard deduction, there's no longer an incentive for most taxpayers to do it because it doesn't matter anymore. Even though up to $10,000 of those taxes would be deductible, most people it doesn't matter because you're claiming the standard deduction. So the former phenomena that everybody, or at least higher income individuals, would estimate what those taxes were by the end of the calendar year and pay them by December 31st doesn't happen. So the state thinks that they saw a substantial inflow of kind of those people who just met the bare minimum that they had to get and then paid the balance due when they filed their returns on April 15th or before. And secondly, they think there was substantial capital gains that were captured. We had a pretty good stock market through 2/3 of the way through last calendar year, so some people may have grabbed those before the market started declining at the beginning of October, and others, like myself personally, were caught when the markets really started going in the tank in December. I had the stop loss on 3 stocks that I owned. Every one of them executed the week before Christmas. Caught me with substantial capital gains that I wasn't anticipating. And I don't think that I'm the only one who was in that situation. They just think that finally the effect of a court decision that says we can now collect sales taxes from those companies that have no physical presence here but make significant sales of 200 or more or 100 million or more into the state of Minnesota must now pay our sales tax. So that's the record there. So with that, I'm going to conclude, turn things over to Steve to talk about transportation unless they have any questions for me.
Okay, well, it's nice to be in Blue Earth County. Everything I'm going to say here can be tested by Commissioner Sternberg. He's one of the state's experts, as you know, and was up at the Capitol a lot. So if I stray at all,
You're too kind.
I'm sure he'll correct me. Transportation, like all of the other 10 major budget items, as we hit the end of the session, as you recall, we finished and had no budget. Went into special session a few days later and came out of there with a budget. And in transportation, as it relates to general funds, I think most people were fairly disappointed. Transportation was given $93.5 million in general funds, and it was allocated this way. The MNLARS replacement system, which was a compromise that the new governor made with the Republican Senate to kind of go the route that they suggested, to put this thing out on bid to a private contractor, was agreed to, and $55.67 million was set aside for use in that future contract. Metro Mobility, which has been an ongoing issue for years, searching for its own separate line item, received that and will get $23.19 million in fiscal 2020. There was an additional $13 million set aside for fiscal year 2021 if the money is available. And based on what Keith has been saying, reflecting the projections, it looks like that money will be there to be spent. And then again, under the Deputy Registrar's reimbursement, there was $13 million given. Now, there's a lot of committee testimony that's taken place the last couple of years on this whole MNLARS system. Because of the inability to get that system to work, a lot of these deputy registrars on the private side of it, but also in various governmental units, took a lot of losses. And there were some pretty tragic cases that were heard in detail by the committee And the $13 million reflects the cost of trying to compensate those people in some way for the losses that they took because of the inability of the system to work. So that kind of handles the general fund side of it. On the overall issue, I think the best way to describe the last 5 months of conversation on transportation funding is we came out of the election, moved towards the start of the session. We had elected a new governor who had campaigned openly in favor of a gas tax. And the House switched hands, and the budget they ultimately put together reflected the governor's budget, which if it had become law would have been a record amount of money for road and bridge funding in a lot of the traditional sources, gas tax, license tab fees, there was a metropolitan sales tax for transit, and a variety of other things along that line. However, the Senate, remaining in Republican hands, who had previously been in control, felt that they had accomplished some major initiatives back in the 2017 session. And of course, the centerpiece of their solution to the problem is to transfer existing general funds to transportation, which they were able to do in part in the 2017 session. And the centerpiece of that was sales tax on auto parts. So the reason that I give that explanation is that after 5 months of hearings, lots of debate, the House actually following through and passing their multi-billion-dollar bill, which reflected the governor's views on things, the Senate pretty much took a stand-pat position, in effect arguing for current statute, you might say, which they were responsible for in the 2017 session. And I guess the simplest way to put it is that by the end of the session and the special session, the Senate position largely prevailed in all of the major categories of funding, which meant there was no new funding. But it's important to note that under existing statute, which is what their position was, there will be some increases in funding for roads and bridges based principally on 3 things. The first being the centerpiece of their proposal, the sales tax on auto parts. Existing statute calls for that to continue to roll forward and bring on a higher and higher percentage of the total. If that, when that sales tax on auto parts gets fully transferred, it'd be about $275 million a year. And there's another $114 million that will roll forward in the next year as a result of sticking with current statute, which was the Senate position. Along with that was the issue that's been discussed for many years now, since 2008, which is the general funds from the sales tax on leased vehicles. Back in 2017, which was their year to prevail, they transferred $32 million in general funds into transportation. Under the House position and the governor's position, that would have been rescinded. But the Senate position prevailed, so that $32 million stays on the books for transportation. And the meaningful part of that for all of us is that the bridge fund that was created out of that new money in 2017 is retained, and that will lead to another $13 million the first year, $14 million the second year for bridges. And then the third item is the Corridors of Commerce program. There was, again, in current statute, which was the Senate position, additional trunk highway cash of $25 million a year for this coming biennium. In other words, $50 million for the coming biennium for additions to the Corridors of Commerce. And that kind of takes care of the financial end of it. There were some individual transportation bills signed into law by the governor. I'll just highlight a few. Again, back in about March, with MNLARS being a real focus, they passed a bill that provided some immediate cash, several $1 million, into the existing system to kind of keep it going to the end of the session. Then there was the bill that got a lot of public attention, which is the ban on the use of handheld cell phones. That did pass. That was bipartisan, and that will take effect August 1st. So there'll be some adjusting on the part of lots of citizens to that law. And then because of a major tragic accident involving light rail transit, where a person was killed, there was a bill that was passed to subject light rail transit operators to the reckless or careless driving law that people driving cars adhere to. And then also there was a bill passed involving the work zone flaggers, you know, the construction sites along highways and so forth. And then there were some other important items that passed related to transportation that were embedded inside transportation bills and other procedures like that, that involve things like the ditch mowing haying issue, which I know you've spent some time on this board over the years. In effect, what's gone on there is the moratorium that's been in place is extended for one more year. There was lots of committee time and debate over truck weight increases. This particular time it had to do with septic system pumping trucks, and in the end, that did not pass, so there was no change. I'll skip the Metropolitan Council stuff. There was a $1 filing fee increase for vehicle registration and titling, but there was no increase in the driver's license filing fee. So in conclusion, let me just be really clear. After all the discussion, all the activity in the House, all of the activity on the part of the governor, there was no gas tax increase, there was no license tab increase, there was no metropolitan sales tax increase, and of course, importantly, there was no bonding bill, which meant that there was no money for the local road wetland replacement program, which will be an issue that will be growing in importance again as we look towards the beginning of next year, because we've already got 4 out of 10 districts that have no credits. And so Keith and I and others spent lots of time talking to legislators about this problem. I mean, more and more they've started to really understand it. We get a lot of heads nodding yes, but in the end there was no votes that said yes, and there was no bonding bill, which is where this is usually decided. So that would be the conclusion of the report on transportation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Any questions?
I have one question. The weight limits, is the only thing that still is exempt is garbage trucks?
It seems like it.
That's kind of what I wondered.
But every session, there's new stuff.
Yeah.
There was some stuff that floated around with lumber trucks up north again this year.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, they've got, it's interesting because a lot of the people that push for that are the same ones who vote no on gas
Yeah.
tax and things like this.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
I appreciate all the
Thank
work
you.
that you
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you,
Thank you
Steve.
very much.
Next, we have Nancy to cover the Health and Human Services.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see all of you. Steve and I got here a little early today, so we spent some time in your little community
If I
park
can
drinking.
interrupt you for one
coffee.
second, I do want to make note of your county engineer. He does a fantastic job, and he's a real regular attender at our monthly meetings and adds a lot to it. So I apologize for interrupting, Nancy.
No problem. I was
Didn't
just
wanna
telling a
forget
park
that.
story.
He is pretty amazing. He came to DC with me last week.
He's a good guy, and he knows a lot.
Very good.
Which park? What, the little one where by the construction zone? What is that little community park? Little city park with? Yeah, it was very nice. Anyway, I am here today, and you've rarely heard me say this. It was a really good year for Health and Human Services, so I'm happy to be reporting that. Several county priorities were included in the final HHS bill. An issue that we've been working on with the Department of Human Services for quite a while, about a year and a half, relating to county appeals, is included in the bill. This is for those folks that have there's a delay in their release from either the Minnesota Sex Offender Program or the CBHH hospitals, and want to shout out that Angie Youngerberg was a key part of those meetings that led to this this resolution. So going forward, if there's a delay caused by the facility, a couple of examples I'll give you is the decision that they no longer meet medical criteria is made on a weekend when we don't have folks ready to do anything about it. If the documentation isn't ready, if they don't agree with our discharge plan, those things are all now appealable under the language that was passed. So we were happy to get that across the line. Another issue, or another couple of things were included in last year's vetoed bill, and one was data sharing between the sheriff and social services. It's limited data exchange, and it's for the purposes of getting folks that are being released from our jails the appropriate level of social services that they may need. It's up to the client, totally optional for the client. If the next day they say, I had a bad day, I don't need you, that data has to be destroyed within 15 days by social services. So it's very limited. The child protection withhold, the 20% withhold was eliminated. They did put funding into the Child Welfare Training Academy that will be housed at the University of Minnesota. They restored grants in mobile crisis grants to the 2017 levels. I know Blue Earth County and some of the surrounding counties did receive a reduction. As other counties came online, they kind of reduced the amount of grants that were available for the existing counties that had these grants. They restored that to the 2017 level. They also picked up the non-federal share of children's intensive psychiatric services. The feds were paying for this previously, and it fell to the counties if the state didn't pick that up. The state has now picked up that share. They've also added beds, 80 residential beds beginning July 1st of 2020, and another 70 on July 1st of 2023. They put $20 million into systems modernization, which has been on our radar for a long period of time. Keith talked about the provider tax. We were very concerned about what that $700 million hole might do to county budgets, and so we were pleased to see that that was included, that it's an ongoing tax. Keith also mentioned the sex offender program. We did pick up a cost share there. The state is investing an additional $16 million into the system, but charging counties 25% for those folks that are receiving provisional discharges. The estimation is about $3.52 million statewide per biennium. However, this is more than offset by the state taking over the county cost share related to behavioral health services. The state is assuming the current county cost share for MA paid services, which will save counties about $8 million per biennium, and is also picking up the county share of room and board, which will save counties an estimated $10 million in the first biennium and $9.3 in the second. So that offsets the cost share, if you will. We did indicate that we were not pleased. We never are pleased when they balance their budget on the backs of counties, but we did pick up that sex offender program share. In terms of public health, there were a number of things that were also included. SHIP does remain funded at the current rate of $17.5 million a year. There's new language that says that up to 100% of tribal grants and 25% of grants to community health boards can be used for culturally or ethnically focused strategies. Telemedicine, this was one of our initiatives that was part of the bill that was vetoed last year, and they did include the exemption to the MA limit on telemedicine services for the treatment and control of tuberculosis. They funded the statewide tobacco cessation quit line at $4.3 million in the first biennium, $5.7 in the second. They added e-cigarettes to the Clean Indoor Air Act, and they expanded the prohibition of tobacco products to charter schools. The previous legislation had just referenced public schools, so now it's also included in charter schools. In terms of medical cannabis, the Department of Health can add a delivery method or modify a qualifying medical condition upon petition from a member. And there are additional dispensaries that will be allowed, but they did not include the language that was included on the House side that would have allowed the marijuana plant in the raw form to be utilized, and that was not included. In terms of standalone bills, Governor Walz signed a bill early on that was an initiative of ours relating to user acceptance testing for new software that's coming online that counties will be using primarily. Opioid prevention, that was about a 3-year process. It did pass the bill did pass a session as one of the last bills in the regular session. They will collect about $42 million from increased fees from pharmaceutical manufacturers. Of that $42 million, 16.3 will go to counties and tribal social service agencies for child protection services for families that are affected by addiction. Another $16.3 million will go into prevention or front-end services, if you will, so that was divided in half. They also put money into traditional healing grants, non-narcotic pain management, and BCA drug scientists and labs. And Mr. Meyer, you asked last week about when these dollars would be available. The increase is going into effect July 1st for the pharmaceutical manufacturers, so there will be about a year's delay before these funds will be available, but that is the timeline. What did not pass, this one really is a disappointment. We've been working on the Yellow Line project for so long, and everyone loves it. It just is something that I think that that became caught up in the tribunal process, if you will. It wasn't on the radar. It didn't happen. We've talked to Senator Rosen and staff. She's so committed to this and wants to get it done. So we will be back again next year to get it done. I have talked to the Department of Human Services, who indicated there was nothing, sinister about this. It was the process at the end of session with maybe not the right people in the room at the right time. There was no expansion for home visiting, which the House had in its bill. No expansion of local public health grants, again, that was proposed by the House, was not included. And T21 was in on the House side, but the Senate just wasn't going to go there, and so that was not included. Some discussion about the African American Family Preservation Act. Didn't get it across the finish line, but there will be interim discussions on that over the summer and into the fall. There were a couple of related bills that I would like to point out. There's language that Governor Walz signed into law that reestablishes the parent-child relationship after a parent's rights have been terminated for what is considered a low-level crime. It cannot involve children. That was signed into law. And also the Child Welfare Training Academy that we talked about is to include a cultural component. So those were some of the things that the proponents of the African American Family Preservation Act wanted to see this year, and again, it will be ongoing. One last thing I would mention that did not finish or did not get across the finish line was the One Care buy-in. That was a proposal that both Governor Walz and the House basically would open Minnesota Care to others, and it just didn't get across the finish line. And the last thing I would mention that I should have in there is the reinsurance that the Senate Republicans wanted included was included. What has happened, there's no new money, but there was some unexpended funds, and so those dollars will go into the reinsurance program. If those dollars are not spent, they will revert to the general fund at the end of the next 2 years. So with that, I would mention again, you're very well represented. You know that already at the legislature. Both Phil Klassen and Angie Youngerberg are always a phone call away, and just very, very good representatives of counties as a whole. And I would answer any questions.
Any questions?
Under the housing, let's see, it was 13 million one time. I was looking for statewide had housing for affordable housing, not the. Yeah, I guess there's 10. That was 10 million annually for family homeless prevention assistance programs.
What page are you on?
That's on the special session, chapter 1. It's like the last.
Is it page 7? I'm sorry.
It's about one of the last pages, second to last.
Agriculture and housing.
It's 104, I think it is.
6 of 8. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how counties were, how that worked actually.
The 10.6 million for homeless.
Yeah, there's a lot here. You have a big section too.
I do have a lot. It takes a lot of resources to deal with Health and Human Services. No, I know you're a friend.
Yeah, 104. Yeah, it's under 104, page 104. On the right-hand side towards the bottom.
Yeah, the $10.26 million. I would, Commissioner, have to track down the language on that in terms of how this, how it travels or trickles down to the counties. But this was in the agriculture and housing bill, and so there was a lot of discussion on homelessness that was completed as a separate bill, separate from Health and Human Services. But I'm happy to look into that language.
Well, that'd be good. I have with being on the board with our homeless shelters here. It's my area, so.
Okay.
We currently
I should know
receive that family homeless prevention grant as a regional project, and we share it with our local community agency, and so we're a fiscal agent, so if there's more money, that'd be good news for us.
Great.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy.
I want to introduce the newest member of our staff, Carly Stark. Carly is the successor to Ryan Erdman, who the position that we share a contract with the AMC and MAC. So Carly.
So with the public safety committees this year, the House and Senate took two very different approaches. The House introduced a lot of policy bills, and the Senate focused mostly on budget, which means in that final negotiating process, most of the policy was scrapped. Some things that did pass was a change in inmate transfer protocols. Previously, if you had a female inmate, you would have to have a female officer or sheriff's deputy transfer that person if they were going more than 100 miles. That would take female deputies off the road a lot more often than male deputies, which means they wouldn't get the experience they needed on the road. Now, you can have a different sex or opposite sex transporter as long as there's a camera in the car, which means female deputies can stay on the road, basically. The tele-CPR bill passed, and what that does is it requires that dispatchers be trained in giving CPR over the phone. For smaller counties or 911 operating places, you can opt out and just create a protocol to transfer that call to someone who is trained in that telephone CPR. There were some changes to sexual assault protocols. All law enforcement agencies will have to have sexual assault investigation protocols in writing by October 1st, and that would also apply to county sheriff's departments. Another change was that victims of sexual assault can now report in any jurisdiction in the state, which will require law enforcement agencies to make sure they have the proper system for referring those reports to the right jurisdiction, because if you investigate and charge in the wrong jurisdiction, the case can be thrown out. The Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative was funded. They got about $500,000 per year of the biennium for staffing and for local community grants. Now, unfortunately, two important county issues did not pass. The county probation funding, so for Community Corrections Act counties and county probation officer counties, the funding did not pass, which means that the counties have to pick up inflationary increases in salaries for all county probation. That is something that I am going to be working very hard on next year to try and figure out how to get more sustainable funding for county probation, because the county's cost is just going up while the state is stagnant. The other thing that didn't pass was local emergency management grants. However, the money did stay in farther through the process than it has in the past. So it made it and just dropped off right during that final negotiations. So that's a positive thing going forward, but unfortunately this year we don't see any of that money. If you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chair, but just a comment on the funding for the EMS. I'm on the EMS board, and it was nice to see it get this far, but we were really hoping to get that. So we'll start again next year and hopefully get a better run at it. So
yes,
thanks for all your work on it.
They'll be a little more mindful at the end during negotiations, because I know in the public safety bill they just ran out of time and a lot of things just got thrown out.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Nice when we got that hands-free bill, the fines for the hands-free would have went to EMS. You know, that would, it would make sense. I mean, we're losing the seatbelts because 90-some% of the population now is using their seatbelts, so we're not having the seatbelt violations, which go towards EMS. And all of a sudden we have a new driving law, which is to protect people, and I have a feeling come August 1st, there'll be a lot of people that are very surprised that the red and blue lights are stopping them. But that it would have been great if those fines could have went towards a portion of those fines could have went towards the EMS, because EMS certainly needs that funding. So.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if there are no other questions, I do want to thank Blue Earth for its continued membership in our organization. Particularly want to recognize Commissioner Brunder and Commissioner People for their longtime service on our board of directors. They do an excellent job of attending and representing Blue Earth County there. I also want to recognize your staff. Bob does a great job in keeping us apprised of Blue Earth counties. I'd also want to recognize Lisa Malinsky, who's a regular participant in our fiscal officers meeting and shares a lot of information as to the initiatives occurring down here that might want to be emulated by other counties. So with that, I'll conclude. Be happy to answer any final questions or hear any comments.
I would just like to extend a thank you to you, Keith. I've been on this committee for, I think since I've been on the board, so over 16 years, and went through a couple commissioners as my cohort going to that meeting, but you've always been the information's always been very well delivered, and your staff has always done a great job, and it's been a pleasure to work with you, and I hope you the best for your retirement, and thanks for all your service to the state and to the counties for all these years.
I can only ditto that, and of course, only part of the time, but you're definitely a solid resource on everything having to do with state and county.
And thank you all for being here today. It's an excellent report, and we appreciate the fact that you're here.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thanks.
Thank you
Hope you
very
can join
much.
us for lunch if
And
you're
I'm sure
available.
me and Steve will be working hard together in the future, trying to get some sort of a transportation funding bill to work together, but that's all a process, isn't it, Steve?
It is.
It's a never-ending effort.
We just have our committee reports and we're going for lunch, so
Yeah.
if you guys are available, we'd
Yeah.
certainly love to have you for lunch.
I'm privileged.
Great.
Okay, who wants to start on their committee report?
Well, I can.
Okay, why don't you go ahead, Vance?
Let's find it here. Okay. June 11th, our last board meeting. We had a work session, and then we had the County Road 27 open house. On June 12th, there was a GMG legislative breakfast up at SCC that a few of us attended. I think Colleen and Mark were there. On June 13th, mayors and clerks in Vernon Center. On June 14th, I had a MnDOT Area Transportation Partnership. I then had a Highway 169 call-in for the Transportation Alliance fly-in because Highway 169 Coalition joined us last week for the first time.
Oh, really? It was
That
the first time?
Very first time, and so that was a real plus. And then there was later on that afternoon, I had an air show meeting for the upcoming air show, which started on the 15th. I spent my whole day up at the driving a little cart hauling people that day. On the 16th, I flew out to Washington, D.C. for the fly-in, and that started on the 18th. Actually, the 16th and 17th, my wife and my 12-year-old grandson came with, so we showed them parts of Washington, D.C. The fly-in started on the 18th that afternoon, and we had a speaker, which was Alex Hergot. He's the executive director of the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council. And that's just the way it sounds. He is working on creating an easier permitting process so we can get, when we go to get a permit for roads or whatever, we don't have to go through 12 different things. Now,
The problem
he's
is-
working federally, which means a very large portion of money, but at least the thought process is there. I think they all federally, they're understanding the problems we're going through and the state is going through and all the townships are going through when we're trying to get roads and processes done. Sometimes we have to wait years to get different permits, which is ridiculous, and it raises the cost of for the county and the townships and the cities, and so it was a good thing to listen to. On the 19th, we started with a breakfast there in Washington, D.C., and then we had Colin Peterson, Jim Hagedorn, Betty McCullough, Pete Stauber, Dean Phillips, and Angie Craig, who is chairing the transportation. And myself and Colleen met with her and different port people afterwards and actually talked transportation. So that was very, very positive for us. That afternoon, we had a reception at the Russell Building with Senators Tina Smith and Amy Klobuchar, and had some very nice conversations with our senators. And you know, I think Blue Earth County certainly is recognized in the state of Minnesota. On the next morning, we had a breakfast, and then we flew home that afternoon. The 21st, myself and Colleen had an AMC board meeting. We heard from AMC's preferred business partners, and then later on, they had an election for the NACO board position, and Tony Carter received the bid for that. They talked about the upcoming annual meeting, and it's extended this year, and so it will run Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday morning. Instead of quitting on Tuesday, it's going to go through and then end. And we talked about how we make sure people just don't leave before that last day. On the 24th, yesterday, 3 of us went to the FCC Midwest Informational meeting. A good meeting to kind of update us on scams and different things that are going on. And this morning I had my airport commission, and we talked about the air show. Because of the weather, we had somewhat of a cut in the amount of people, but they figured 25 to 30,000 people still showed up, where they were hoping for 30 to 40. But you know, I don't think they have the exact number, but that's what the estimates are right now, and that's the end of mine.
Okay, thank you, Vance. Mark?
Okay, Vance, I had left off where, no. I don't have a big report. The County Road open house, 27, County Road 27. And then we did have, Kip and I went to the MICA on the 12th of June. As always, that was very valuable, worthwhile. And then I did go to that GMG breakfast too with Colleen, and you were there, and others. Let's see, now I had the June, the townships, was it the 20th, I think? And then the mayors and clerks was around there, and then mayors, clerks, and then the townships later, and then, and in between that, I was at, Father's Day. I did go to the air show too. And I want to know what a Blue Earth County liaison does, because you are our liaison.
He drives a golf cart.
I was impressed.
I drove a golf cart.
It was on the program, so I was kind of impressed.
I drove a golf cart during that whole show. Yes,
I didn't see you, or you didn't try to run me down. So
I wasn't there.
You were there on Sunday?
I was there on Saturday.
Well, then you missed the. You had to fly out.
I missed the Thunderbirds.
You had to miss Thunderbirds.
But you know, I've been blessed in the past to see them fly, but I drove a golf cart hauling people from the parking lots and back and forth, and actually it got wet.
Well, yeah,
Saturday.
It rained on Saturday, yeah. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Colleen?
Okay, Vance has pretty well talked about most of the things that I've done. CASA 27, the GMG legislative update, which was interesting because what happened? Not a lot, you know. I had some conversations with Arthur Scott at NACO about FCC and just what NACO's positions are. And one of the biggest positions is how do we do how do we teach people how to use the internet in a better way? Some people are really afraid of it, and so how are we going to increase the literacy? That's a big push for NACO. Along with 5G and 4G. We're all about 5G, but we need a lot more towers if we do 5G. And those have to be, the permits have to be issued within 60 days. Otherwise, they're approved or they can sue. That's a difficult thing for our small communities. And for us, you know, if there are environmental issues, if SHPO is involved, within 60 days, you usually can't get it done. So that's a huge issue federally. Mayors and clerks. I went to the influencing marketing that the university puts on. You know, how do you influence people when you market, and what are the different ways of doing that? It was interesting. South Central Energy talking about ethanol and other types of renewable fuels. You know, what are the issues, and are they possible? And solar comes into that also. Diversity Council had their Juneteenth celebration. Luckily, the city of Mankato gave them the first floor of the parking ramp on 2nd Street because it poured. But it was a really nice event, and a lot of community members there. Compassionate communities, we had talked about that earlier. It is how do you deal with people at the end of life, and how do we have a community that helps with that? It's getting started. Blue Earth County, Mankato, Blue Earth County, Nicollet County are the pilots in the state. It's actually Marianne Dotson who is pulling this all together, and so she's trying to figure out how we do that.
She's excellent on that.
Marianne is great, and Kristen from SHIP was there from Blue Earth County, and is doing a lot of data gathering and figuring out how to get our different agencies to work together. For instance, Mayo. You know, how do we intersperse all the data and have one repository? I think there's some really good things going on with that. I think it's really important. The city of Mankato has offered to do the website. So I think there's some really good partnerships. Vance has pretty well talked about the Transportation Alliance. We had a good turnout, about 65 people lobbying, and
Good turnout.
yeah, it was all about, you know, how do we get the word out? How do we get the transportation infrastructure done? And, you know, we used to have 3 people on transportation, 3 congressmen, and then Amy, the Senator Klobuchar, excuse me. And now we're down to 2 with Angie Craig and Congressman Stauber. So I think just, and they're both brand new, so, you know, trying to get everybody up to speed is really, really important. We had the AMC board, and as, I don't know if everybody knows, AMC's remodeling the building. It started Monday. So most of the staff is working in the conference room with plugs going everywhere, trying to figure out how they can, you know, get their computers to work.
To the Capitol and go to the AMC building, you're going to be
You're going to have a problem.
surprised, and it's a mess because it's also going to take over the parking lot and stuff like that. So it's going to be a mess. If you don't need to go there, I wouldn't go. So.
And the other thing is, you know, they were trying to get people to take a lot of the things that they didn't need, like cubicles. And so they were going to some schools, they were going to other places. There was a lot of stuff that AMC had kept that they didn't need. It's kind of like us. As we're making the move, what do we get rid of, and why did we keep that in the first place?
Very familiar.
So it's really nice that they're being donated to places that need it, and I know that's what we plan on doing too, so that's great. I also went to Harlan Madson's 70th birthday and 50th anniversary on Sunday. It was great, and it was fun to see some commissioners who'd been around for quite a while, like me, there. And so just reconnecting, and Harlan was so excited to see people because it was a big surprise. He had no idea. So that was nice. And yesterday we did FCC. That's my report.
Good, thank you. Colleen?
Thank you.
Kip?
Well, after the last meeting, we had our work session. We talked about the Mankato SHOP feasibility study. I heard from somebody from Southern Minnesota Initiative Fund and the Veteran Services Report, which is always good to hear, and it's wonderful we're doing such a good job with that. And then Bob reported on several items that we have ongoing. That afternoon, I was also at the County Road 27 open house, which is in my district, and I thought the open house went really well. We got some good feedback from several landowners, and I think the staff will work diligently to try to resolve some of those issues before it gets in front of us. That night I was out to the Luray Township Officers Meeting just to kind of see what's going on out in the township. They have some road issues and some solar farm issues yet in Luray Township, so it was good that I was there and
No
got
doubt.
to answer some questions and just kind of feel out what's going on in that area. And it was already mentioned, Mark and I were at MICA and they gave us a very good report today, so I won't elaborate on that. Will and I were at the extension meeting. Everything's going really well up there. We got our reports from the 3 different committees and things are moving along as well as can be expected. Everybody's getting geared up for the fair. We got our new 4-H person on board and an intern from someone from a local 4-H group here in the Mapleton area, so that was nice to see. Mayors and clerks, got to hear our Sheriff Peterson talk a little bit about what's going on in Blue Earth County. He did a wonderful job briefing the Mayors and Clerks Association on that. Not a real big turnout at Mayors and Clerks, was a little lighter, but that, it's kind of the last meeting before we take a break for July and August, so that's understandable.
They were lucky we all were there.
Yeah. And then South Central Workforce, we had our quarterly meeting. Nothing new really to report there. Things are moving along fairly well. Had our MVAC Board Executive Committee meeting that afternoon after that. Nothing new to report there. The organization's doing really well. Had a few grants to approve and some repairs on one of the buildings and one of the other communities with a new roof and new HVA system, so it's everywhere. And then I was also at the Township Officers Meeting, and pretty good group there, and they had somebody from the Soybean Association speak, and their representative from their initiative or their insurance trust was there and gave a little presentation, and Will did a fine job reporting on behalf of the county. And that brings me up to today, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Kip. Most of the stuff that I was at has been mentioned, so the open house and work session. On the 12th, I was at a detox personnel meeting. Our director of detox has resigned, so we're looking at upgrading the job description and advertising for a new director. So I think it's going well so far. And of course, the Extension Advisory, the Mayors and Clerks. On the 19th, I was at the Watonwan River Policy meeting in St. James. That's part of the One Watershed, One Water Plan thing. We're moving along with that. The township officers, of course, the FCC meetings, and had several meetings with landowners with drainage issues. So that's my report.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
forgot one really important thing. I went to Keith Carlson's retirement party.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was lovely. It was really nice. Nice
Glad
job,
you
you guys.
represented
Yeah, that's great. So, okay, is there anything else?
That's all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we will recess to the Bonfire Restaurant.
Here we go.